Thank you guys for tuning in to our YouTube channel, TGM Television. Please share this. Tell your friends about our Bible study. We have Bible study every Wednesday night. You're probably seeing this on Thursday. But thank you for watching. Please let everybody know. Thank you to my Facebook Live crew. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? How y'all doing? It's good to see everybody. Thank you to all of you, the TGM class. We It is Wednesday night and we are in the house. Everybody is excited about this lesson. It is part 3 of a series that I'm doing talking about being a Christian and dealing with our emotions as Christians. You know, some people, they would have you think that when you get saved, all you think is Jesus, 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 God, 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 Spirit, 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 Spirit. And it really sometimes it doesn't just work like that. We still have emotions. We still live in our human world. And so tonight's lesson wants to highlight one of those things. The topic of tonight's lesson is finding God in spite of our frustrations. And it's coming from Job chapter 7. I'm going to begin reading at verse number 17 through 21. As I said, it's a continuation of last week's lesson. 2 weeks ago, I started out dealing with anger. Last week, we dealt with frustration. And tonight, we're continuing the second and last part of frustration. It's not meant to be a long lesson. It's not meant to be a real deep lesson. It's just meant to be very practical. All right. So I'm going to start off reading at verse 17, chapter 7, Job. It says, "What is man that you magnify him, or you watch him closely, and that you are so concerned about him, that you examine him every morning, and that you tempt or try or test him every moment? Will you ever turn your eyes away from me, or leave me alone until I swallow my spittle? Or have I sinned? What have I done to you, O watcher of men?" This is Job talking to God. "Why have you set me as your target, so that I am a burden to myself? Why then do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? For now I will lie down in the dust, and you will seek me, but I will not be." That sounds like a frustrated man. That sounds like a frustrated man. I'm going to start out by asking this question. Have you ever found yourself at a frustrating point in your life? Have you ever found yourself at a frustrating point in your life? And here, let me just give you a backdrop to what Job is dealing with. Job, at this point, you know, everybody talks about he lost all his stuff. That's true. He lost all his kids. That's true. But here's the issue. The issue is that he's been living right. He's been doing his best to honor God with his life. Not only that, he doesn't understand what God is doing right now. God, I expect you to bless me for living right, and I'm getting the opposite of a blessing, right? That's number one. Then on top of that, he goes to his friends for consolation. When you're going through stuff, you want somebody who can empathize or sympathize, or any ATHY, anything. Give me something. Now he goes to his friends. Now watch it. He's misunderstanding God. He doesn't understand what God is doing in his life. Then his friends come along and misunderstand him. So now I'm frustrated because I don't understand what God is doing. And then the people who are supposed to help me to feel better are only making me more frustrated because they're judging me and they talking down on the situation that they feel like they know, but they really just don't understand. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been there where you're dealing with something in your life, or you're at a point or at a place in your life and you need somebody just to understand, and it seems like everybody that you try to talk to you, nobody just get it. And you know, everybody got to add their 2 cents in. Instead of just sitting there and being an understanding, the patient and kind friend, you get judged, or you get criticized, or you get put down. This is Job. On top of that, his body is ailing. He's sick on the inside. To me, I would be frustrated. I love God with all my heart. But if all my friends didn't understand, and I don't understand what God is doing in my own life, and I'm sick and don't feel good, I'm going to be frustrated. Job is frustrated, in complete solitude. And I made the point last week that sometimes God does allow us to be misunderstood. Sometimes God does allow us to get to a place where we feel like we're by ourselves and nobody can understand or answer what it is that we have, the questions that we have, because sometimes he uses that to push us into prayer. I know there have been times in my life that I really didn't pray seriously and honestly from my heart until I got into some stuff that I couldn't just talk to nobody about. And so sometimes God does use that frustration to push us. Tonight, that was one of the concluding points from last week. Tonight, we're going to go further. And I want to highlight that Job in his loneliness and Job in his despair becomes frustrated, and it pushes him to the point of becoming bitter in his situation. Bitter in his situation. What does bitter mean? Holding on to the hurt, holding on to the anger and pain of a situation that I feel like I've been done wrong in. I know all of us in here, we've been alive. You've been alive over 20 years. You've been alive over 15 years. You feel like you done experienced some things where some people just done you wrong for no good reason. Have you ever been disappointed by people for no good reason?
Oh, yes.
Have you ever been lied on or cheated on by people for no good reason?
Oh, yes.
Have you ever been done wrong, heartbroken by people for no good reason?
Yeah.
Sometimes when you in a situation like that, it'll make you bitter a little bit. And when people talk about bitter like it's bad, and it is if you let it eat away at you. But sometimes, honestly speaking, when you in a situation and your heart is broken for no good reason, somebody make you mad or make you sad or upset you for no good reason, it makes you bitter. Job it has become bitter in his situation. I want to highlight frustration. We talking about frustration now. How does frustration work? Frustration does not work in a big way. Frustration works subtly. They have this thing called chronic illness. You know what a chronic illness is? Chronic illness may not be something big or major, but it's something that is ongoing.
Yeah.
Something that continuous. And this is how frustrations act. You mentioned about being at work and having a coworker and y'all's relationship wasn't as tight. Over time, if you don't watch it, that frustration will begin to build on the inside. Frustration happens not all at once, and this is why it's anger's ugly cousin, because anger comes out right at you. But frustration works subtly. It constantly whispers to you in your ear quietly, and you get more and more frustrated. That's how frustration kills you. Frustration does not beat you all at once. Frustration chips away. It chips away at your happiness. It chips away at your peace. You know, like you said, you had that peace when you at work and you dealing with the things that you live with. When you got that peace, frustration chips away at that peace slowly but surely. I'm gonna ask the question: has frustration ever talked to your mind?
Oh yes.
When you get these thoughts like, I'm about to.
You catch frustration like setting. You could be just thinking and not thinking nothing in particular. All of a sudden, that bad incident happens. Then you go off and you start talking, and then you start saying stuff that you probably should have said at the time.
Yeah.
You up here rehearsing something that don't even need to be rehearsed.
See, there you go.
It's brings about a constant reminder of that thing.
See, and that's exactly, and that's what I really want to highlight. How frustration works in us. We Christians and we love God. We Christians and we love God, but we gotta, we not only deal with the devil, we deal with the world. We not only deal with the world, we deal with our flesh. But sometimes the devil and the world can tag team up against us. And what it'll do, it'll cause the enemy that's in me to start wanting to, you know what I'm saying? Frustration, it works very subtly. Ooh, if she say that one more time. Ooh, if he come over here one more time. It's not the big stuff, it's the small stuff. And picture this. Picture how frustration works from the time you wake up until the time you get home, and you taking out frustration on people at home that don't have nothing to do with what you understand what I'm saying? Look at how frustration works. Frustration works subtly. My boss frustrated me at work. My coworkers frustrated me at work. I went to lunch and they put onions on my hamburger and I said no onions. And I'm frustrated. I come back to work. It's supposed to be my break and the boss come back. I'm frustrated. I get off and it's not supposed to be no traffic, but it's a wreck on the freeway. And now it takes me an hour when it would have only took me 20 minutes, and I get home where it should be peace at home, not realizing that I'm on the inside, I'm frustrated.
Yes.
I'm frustrated. I'm agitated. I'm not angry, but I'm on edge. Come on, let's be real in here. Yet I love God with all my heart. Yet I love God with all my heart, but I'm frustrated. Y'all pray for me. Pray for me, cause when I'm driving, frustration talks to my mind. When I'm driving, frustration talk. When I order my food and they don't get it right, frustration talks to my mind. I want us to be real in here, because we are Christians and we have to find God in our frustration. Is it possible to find God in frustration? It is.
Yes, it is.
I'm glad that you said that. Now here's my next question. And this is kind of going piggybacking on the anger thing that we did a couple of weeks ago. Now, have you ever seen someone driving in a car, somebody do something simple as cut them off, and then you get such a crazy response? They got the finger out the window. Have y'all ever seen that? Now, what if you pulled up on side of that person and it was Pastor Marcus? The reason why I'm asking you that is, how would you see me then?
Yeah, perception. Exactly. Yeah, perception.
If you saw the teacher of your Sunday school class, going off in traffic like that, how would you see him then? And it's the thing. This is how frustration works. Frustration is an enemy because it causes us to jump out of character where we normally would not. And now people now see you in a different light that they would have never seen you in had you not understood that is an emotion that I need to get under control. You see what I'm saying? And this is how it beats us. It beats us many times because we don't recognize that frustration is working from the morning time. From the time I wake up. And if you allow it to, it'll constantly whisper in your ear until you respond to it. But tonight, the lesson is finding God in our frustration. Job is frustrated because he does not understand why he's going through what he's going through. Have you ever been at a point in life where you just don't understand why it is you? Have you ever asked this question? What have I done to deserve this? Or why are you doing this to me, God? I know I find myself doing it a lot of time. God, why is this, what is the purpose of this happening in my life? Couldn't you get me to see it a different way?
Right.
Couldn't you get me to understand this a different way? And the answer that God says is no. Because if he could have done it a different way, he would have done it a different way. But the understanding is that God allows things for a certain reason. Now were you finna ask the question?
No,
go right ahead.
What I was finna say was, even though, we'll ask that question, well, God, could you have not done this another way? Well, in essence, when you think about it, I did do it another way. You just didn't listen. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried it another way. And because you decided to ignore that, okay, well, I'm going to try it another way. In so many words, to strike you out. Okay, well, I'm going to zap you, and that's there.
And at the end of the day, the answer to the question is, God, could you have done this another way? No, because you didn't hear it. As long as mama not screaming, you ain't listening. As long as mama ain't got the belt, when you was a kid, my mama, she was out of there. She, beat us. Now, just like that. But no, until mama get to screaming and going crazy, don't nobody turn their head. Don't nobody, you see what I'm saying? But the understanding is that sometimes that God has to allow these things. Sometimes it feels like God is not treating us unfair. I heard a friend of mine, he said to me, God is useless. God is useless. And it did something to me. It did something to me, but I couldn't respond to him in the way that I wanted to respond to him because my thing is I'm trying to compel him.
Right.
So, but his disposition was that way because he felt like God allowed him to experience a hurt and a pain that he felt like he should not have experienced. His mom had passed. And so his thing was, well, when I prayed to God to heal my mom and he didn't heal her, then what's the point of me saying that I believe God or that I'm going to go to church? And the understanding is that sometimes when it feels like God has done us something that's not fair, it's easy for the frustration to send our mind to a different place. And it's the understanding. I want us to get that we cannot allow our frustrations to send us to these crazy kinds of places in our mind. Because if you look at what Job is dealing with, and this is why I love the seventh chapter of Job, because we know Job loves God. We know he is a perfect and upright man who fears God and shuns away from evil. At the same time, in chapter 7, Job is now saying to God, God, why do you have your eyes just focused on me?
Yeah.
Why are you nitpicking in my life this way to the point where I'm losing my mind? I try to go to sleep. I can't sleep because I'm frustrated. I'm hurting. You see what I'm saying? Frustration has now sent his mind to a different place. And we have to be careful because sometimes the things that we deal with in life can become overwhelming.
Yes, they can.
Honest, I love God with all my heart.
Yes.
But sometimes the things that we deal with in our life can become overwhelming. And if you're not careful, the frustration will send your mind to a crazy place. To a crazy place. And we have to be careful not to allow frustration to push us in the wrong direction.
Right.
We have to be careful not to allow our frustrations to push us in the wrong direction. But we have to give God that 2 seconds to say, Lord, you got to be my strength here. You got to help me keep the faith right through here because I'm about to lose it.
Yeah.
I need to go take me a 2-second walk or something so you can get to my mind. We have to be careful during times of frustration because it can push us into a faithless attitude towards our God. Which brings me to the next thing. Job stops talking to his friends and he starts talking to God. I want to ask another question. Man, I hope I get to the whole thing. I want to ask another question. Do you feel like it's wrong to question God? Let me see your hand if you feel like it's wrong to question God. You feel like it's wrong to question God?
I do.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
I do.
I used to feel like that.
I do because that's how I
Was raised.
raised.
Right. Don't you question him.
Don't question. So I don't question him. But a lot of times I be saying, Lord, I don't know what you're doing.
Right.
But just, Lord, just help me to be able to be in one piece.
Yeah.
When you finish with the whole thing, because, I feel like a piece of paper.
Yeah.
A piece of paper, you ever just,
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so, I was taught it's wrong.
You better not.
You don't question God.
Yeah.
Okay. Some people view it as a sign of disrespect. It's like you questioning your mama.
Yeah.
When your mama tell you to do something, you question your daddy. When your daddy tell you to do something. Here's my take on it. And it will shock some of you. And I'm not here to be traditionally correct. I'm not. I'm here to bring a general understanding of the way God operates in our lives. Now, when I look at the Bible and I look at the people in the Bible, I used to think that it was wrong to question God as well. Until things start coming in my life where I didn't understand. My whole disposition to God was this. God, if I'm not supposed to question you, then what am I supposed to think? Where do I get these answers from? Am I just not supposed to get the answers? Until I read Habakkuk. And Habakkuk raised questions to God that were somewhat difficult. And he says, I'm going to sit here until God responds. Jacob, who wrestled with the angel. The thing is that we have to engage God when it comes to our life. We do. What Job does, and if you read, that's why I love the 7th chapter of Job, because it's so practical. When you look at it, there are things that happen to us in our life. And my understanding was that it was wrong to question God because it was a sign of disrespect. It's not wrong when you asking God to get clarity and understanding.
Right.
It's not wrong to get an understanding. My thing is, do you feel like your questions that God can't handle your questions? Do you feel like your questions are too hard for God to answer? Do you feel like you're going to pose a question that God has never heard before? Because my thing is this, when life gets frustrating to a point where you about to go crazy, my whole thought process to God was, God, what is going on? And God, if you can't answer me right now, give me a peace in this situation until I get an understanding. Because other than that, to go through something without at least having some type of understanding, and here's Job. Now watch what Job does. He's frustrated. He has no understanding, and his frustration pushes him to question God at this point. He questions the character of God. He questions the methods of God. He questions everything about God in his situation. And I'm here to tell somebody tonight, if you feel like it's wrong to question God, I think that you should go home and reevaluate that, because that will keep you from getting a point of understanding that may help you in your walk. While we are taught to not question God, my question is, who else are you going to question?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Who else would you go to about those things? Because you know what? Just like you said, I was raised, don't you better not question God.
Right.
My I asked Grandpa a question. Well, Grandpa, if God knew that Adam was going to sin in the garden, why did he put him in there in the first place? And remember, you better not ever question God. All right, Grandpa, but through the course of life, my job is to help us to allow God to move in our lives. I'm not here to tell you if you name it and claim it, it'll be yours. I'm not. I'm here to teach you how God works in an individual's life. And every person in the Bible that God used that got frustrated posed questions to God. Jonah questioned God. Jesus questioned God. Read it. The understanding is that we have to know that God is not just there to tower over us like he's ready to smack us down. He engages us in relationship. I want us to catch that, in relationship. If you married to a person, you wouldn't ask that person a question. If you friends with a person, you're not close enough with this person. You know what? I'm not trying to be rude, but what's really going on here? You know what I'm saying? And then God is just enough God. He may not answer when you want him to, or how you want him to. But what I love about God is that he will give you some type of something if you ask him. And so one of the points I want to highlight tonight is that God can handle your questions. Brought to him and with respect, of course. But God can handle your questions. Your questions do not scare God, and it's not wrong to question God about things that you do not understand. God respects one who wants to do his will, but sometimes get frustrated. Don't you know that God knows and understands that we are only human? We're fragile creatures. We don't have all the pieces to our puzzle. Don't you know that God understands that we're going to lose it sometime? We're going to misunderstand his methods a lot of the time, and we have to go to him. And so one of the things I want to highlight is that it's not wrong to question God, but sometimes it may be just that God wants you to engage him, because sometimes we don't question God because we feel like he don't have an answer to the questions that we ask. God, how could you do this? How could you allow this? And when I start asking God those questions, God started giving me the hard answers, but they were truth and real. You see what I'm saying? And the understanding is that I want us to get that in times of frustration, we can't forget that we have a God who's close to us, who's near to us, that we can engage and bring it. God, you're here to be my God. You're not here to carrot stick me. I'm giving you a prize, but you got to work. No, you're here to be my God, to be my Lord, to be my Savior. You're here to be walking with me as I walk through this wilderness that we call life. So I want us to get that. Job, he stopped talking to his friends and he starts talking to God. And I want us to get this. There are going to be times that you don't understand what God is doing.
Yes.
There are going to be times in your life you love God, but there are going to be times that you just simply don't understand what God is doing. It's simple, and we've heard it before, but we simply have to trust God. Now, let me stick a pin there, because to trust God is not something that just happens because you go to church. It is something that is learned. Y'all in relationship? Y'all in relationship? The way that you learn to trust her is not because she said I'm trustworthy. It's because time proved that you can trust her. The same thing with you. It works the same way with God. When you come into Christ and you hear people saying, just trust God, just trust God. When you first come into the walking with God, not just church, but living the Christian life, walking with God, wanting to see him manifest in your life, trusting God don't just come easy. I haven't met you before. You know, I've heard about you,
You're right,
but I don't know you yet. You see what I'm saying? And this is why I'm highlighting it's okay to question God, because what that does for us is when you see that God can handle what it is that you bring into the table, it helps you to trust him more. See, when I started asking God these questions, and some stuff he didn't answer me the way I wanted him to answer, but when I started asking God the questions and he started revealing the things to me, I started to see, man, you know what? Maybe I can trust. Maybe he is as strong as the Bible says he is. Maybe he does do what the Bible says that he can do. And I'm almost finished with the lesson. All right. Job cries out to God. The understanding is going to be times that you don't understand what God is doing, but we have to learn to simply, trust God. We all have to learn to trust God. Understand you don't have all the pieces to your life's puzzle, but God is the master orchestrator. He brings everything together at the right time. Here's Job's life. At this point in his life, in his frustration, he does not understand what God is doing. I know and I'm just speaking for me. There have been times in my life I didn't understand what God is doing until time passed. See, while you in it, while you dealing with it, you don't get it. You don't see it. You don't understand it. It seems like God, this makes absolutely no sense until you get up the road and realize there was a purpose for me being frustrated all that time. There was a reason. I just couldn't see it. It's a term, too close to the forest to see the trees. Have y'all ever heard that saying before? It means you so deep in it that you don't see what's really happening around you. You don't know what God is actually doing in your life, but just know and trust that God is doing something. And so with that, I'm almost done with the lesson. Job was frustrated because suffering was known to be God's response to sin. Suffering was known to be punishment or judgment for a person's sin, but to consider that God was using suffering for something different was something that they couldn't understand in your mind. I'm gonna ask the question like this. When you got a whooping when you was younger, it felt bad. And you didn't see no good to come from that except pain. You didn't understand because a whooping is a form of punishment, and suffering does not feel good. It doesn't. It's known to be punishment, but to consider, now that you've grown, that the whoopings were actually there to redirect your behavior. You understand that? To redirect your mindset. To consider that God was using suffering at this point in Job's life for something more than just suffering. It's hard to understand. It's hard to see it. But until you get to the other side, you won't really understand. And so to consider that God was doing something different was not commonly accepted, and it was difficult for his friends to understand. And one of the things I want to highlight is that God works in mysterious ways. He works in mysterious and crazy ways. And sometimes God may be working through a situation that you have already decided is going to be negative, but God may be using it to work out a greater positive. Did you catch that?
Yes.
You may have already seen or felt and been going through or dealing with a situation in your life that you may already deem to be negative, not realizing that God is working something for a greater positive. Wow. You see what I'm saying? We automatically stamp a negative stamp on situations that don't feel good. And what if I told you that the medicine that tastes the worst was the best for your body?
Right.
What if I told you that the struggle that was the hardest was the best for your future? And this is how God is looking at it. God looks at it from a different way than what we look at it. And we can't judge by what we see, but we have to judge by what we believe. We have to judge our situation by not by what we can see, but by what we believe. God doesn't just work in the good times. And I want to highlight this. And I'm going to conclude with this because we had 28 minutes. I want to conclude with this, that God does not just work in the good times, but God also works in the bad times.
Yeah.
I had to learn that. My situation don't have to be good for God to be working some good.
Yeah.
My situation don't have to feel good for God to be working it for my good.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just because your situation is bad don't mean that God can't work good out of a bad situation.
That's right.
Every story in the Bible started off bad. But God.
Yes.
I want you to catch that. But God. The understanding is God doesn't just work in the good times, but God works in the bad times as well. God works in the lonely times.
Yes.
God works in the frustrated times.
Yeah. Yes.
God works in the emotional times, in the angry times. He's still working. And this is the thing. In frustration, that's not the time to throw up your hands. That's the time to trust that God is doing something. Now, here's the last question. What does it mean to you to trust God? Anybody? What does it mean to you to trust? When I say trust God, what does that mean to you? Anybody? Give me an answer. What does that mean to trust God?
Believe God.
Just to believe Him. Just believe Him.
Let go.
Having a greater understanding.
Having a what?
A greater understanding.
A greater understanding. That could be it. That could be it. To each of us, it means something different. Ultimately, what it means when I say trust God, that means do right and expect God to work it out right. You understand?
I like that.
It means to do right and expect God to work it out right. Even though you don't see your right working.
Yes.
When you trust God, you doing right. Not because you trust what it looked like, but you trust that God is going to work out something better because you did right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the understanding. When I say trust God, I'm saying trust God to do the right thing and trust Him to bless you because you've done the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? That goes beyond what people see. That goes beyond what it looks like to people to do what's right because it's right, not because I want to prove something to somebody else, but because I trust that God rewards those who diligently seek Him.
Yeah.
God rewards me for doing the right thing. God will reward that. So ultimately, I trust God when I do the right thing because I'm not looking for somebody to promote me. I'm looking for God to promote me. And whether you believe it or not, it's frustrating because, and this is the conclusion, it's frustrating because we don't see our right working. Faith is invisible.
Right.
And I say this all the time. Because you don't see prayer working, you feel like it's not working. But my word for tonight in finding God in frustration is that you're frustrated because it feels like the right that you're doing is not working. But I'm here to tell you tonight that God blesses the right if you continue to work it.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you right now, don't give up in doing the right thing. I know sometimes we get frustrated because we seem like, just like Job, I've been doing right. I've been living right, but my life is turning out so wrong. I'm going to tell you from experience, keep doing right. Keep doing right as much as you can. God will bless your efforts. And I'm saying that from personal experience. I had a lot of things to overcome in my life. Still overcoming. I got a giant. We're going to pray for it when we get off camera. We're going to pray for it. But the understanding is there are things that I had to overcome in my life. But I had to trust that I served a God that was bigger than every circumstance, and not just bigger, but I had to trust that my right, that God was going to bless my right after all the wrong I had done.
Yeah.
And I want you to catch that.
Yeah.
After living a life of doing wrong and living wrong, and now you got to overcome some decisions that you made. Now I'm ready to do right. And you not going to see right working.
That's right.
And you going to get frustrated. But here's where you find God in your frustration, that God will bless it.
Yes.
He will bless it.
Yes.
You just got to trust in Him.
Amen.
You got to trust Him. So tonight, in finding God through our frustration, don't forget that you can come to Him. You can talk to Him. He's an ever-present help, a very present help in the time of trouble. That's what the words say. You can talk to Him. When you get frustrated, you can talk. God, I want to slap her right now.
Yeah.
He's not going to be mad at you for saying that.
Yeah.
He made you and He know all about you.
Right.
God, I'm angry right now. God, I'm lonely right now. I'm sad right now. I'm depressed right now. God, I want to do something that I know I shouldn't want to do. Help me. He's there with us. And so that's pretty much the gist of tonight's lesson. When you finding God in frustration, it simply means to turn, not to turn away from God in your frustration, but to turn towards God in your frustration, because he can help you with it. So with that, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Share our post. Go to Instagram. We have a lot of quotes. Share our quotes. Like our quotes. Follow us on Instagram at _God Movement, and Twitter. We have a Facebook page. Go like our page. Go see some of the things that we're doing on Facebook, at the God Movement. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's called TGM Television, what you're watching right now. Tell people about us. We do Bible study every week, once a week. Share our videos. Share our posts. We'll see you next week. God bless you and thank you.